The Declaration of Your Dependence. In the current year of 2017, in an inexplicable declaration, citizens in the United States of America, when in the course of human events it has become possible for one people to dissolve the political bands which have constricted them to the whims of another, and to assume among their powers as earthlings the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of humanity's civilization entitle them, have embraced an indecent reverence to the opinions of elites that requires all should desist in decrying the causes which impel them to subjugation. They claim these to be self-evident truths, that all men are social constructs that are defined by their own creative identification with uncertain and arbitrary rights, that often exclude life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, the state is to preside over men, deriving its increasing powers despite the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government feels offensive to their ends, it is the right of the progressive to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new governance, laying its foundation on such impracticalities and obfuscating its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to redefine safety and happiness. Progressives, indeed, will dictate that governance long established should be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all expedients be shouldered, and that mankind is more disposed to suffer while evils are microscopic, than to strengthen themselves by overcoming these fears to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of challenges and unaccounted for tasks, perplexingly invoking the same objection, exposes a desire to reject them in favor of degeneracy, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guides for their future senility. Such has been the patient subversion by those civilities, and such is now the hypocrisy which convinces them to alter their formidable system of governance. The history of the present warriors of social justices is a history replete with inanities and absurdities, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. They refuse to assent to laws, claiming them to feel unwholesome and unnecessary for the public good. They forbid their governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, and when so instituted, they utterly neglect to attend to them, as they are intended to fail and further their goals of more control. They refuse to pass laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people will relocate from living in places mostly viewed from a great height, from flights frequented by the better and more cosmopolitan. They piece together legislative structures composed in a manner that is unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the day-to-day of the general public's reality, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with their measures. They dissolve representative measures repeatedly for opposing with humane firmness the invasions of the rights of their people. They continue to refuse, after such dissolutions, to allow localized structures to be erected, whereby the legislative powers, capable of action, could return to the people at large their agency. The states remain in meantime exposed to the dangers of matching the reliance on funding from without to considerations within. They endeavor to curate the population of the states. For that purpose, obstructing the policies for naturalization of foreigners, increasingly promoting others to incentivize their migrations, and raising conditions of a new apartheid of lands. They obstruct the administration of justice by refusing their assent to enforce laws established by judiciary powers. They make judges dependent on their whim alone for judication, and further convolute the hierarchy, practice, and rule of law. They propose a multitude of new offices, and send swarms of officers to regulate the people, and parasite off their substance. They keep populated, in times of peace, standing armies without a comparative threat to combat. They affect to render the military independent of and superior to the civilians' needs. They conspire to subject the United States of America to a jurisdiction other than its constitution and unacknowledgeable by its laws. giving assent to their acts of preemptive legislation, to quarter large forces of armed police among themselves, to protect criminals by a mock trial from punishment for various crimes which they commit on the inhabitants of their states, to contract away their trade with all parts of the world, to impose taxes on people without their consent, to deprive them in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, to trap them behind bars after trials for pretended offenses, to admonishing their free system of English laws in neighborly practices in favor of establishing a global governance and enlarge its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument to introduce the same absolute rule of collectivism. To limit your own choices, admonish your most valuable laws, and alter fundamentally the growth of your government. To suspend your own liberties, and declare others invested with power to legislate for you in all cases whatsoever. They abdicate government there by declaring others out of their political correctness and wage war against them. They claim for their so-called greater good, patrol the seas, range the coasts, regulate towns, and destroy the livelihoods of people. They continue to, at this time, to transcribe large amounts of foreign concerns to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous of ages, and totally unworthy of the denizens of a civilized nation. They constrain their fellow cohabitants, take and indoctrinate them to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. They excite domestic insurrections amongst themselves, and endeavor to bring on the opponents of their forefathers, the socialists, fascists, and communists, whose conjoined rule of warfare and welfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, individualists petition for redress in the most humble terms. The repeated petitions are answered only by repeated insult and injury. A progressive whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrannical toddler is unfit to decide the rules of a free people. Nor are individualists wanting in attentions to their conservative brethren, be they within and without the nation's boundaries. They warn them from time to time of attempts by their collectivists to extend unwarrantable jurisdiction over all. They remind them of the circumstances of the emancipation and successful maintenance of the United States of America. They appeal to their innate need for justice and magnanimity, and confirm them by the ties of their common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which will inevitably interrupt their connections and correspondence. Too many are deaf to the voice of justice and civility. Soon it may be unavoidable to acquiesce in the necessity which denounces lack of civility and hold them, as one would hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. You therefore, the residents of the United States of America, in general cohabitation assembled, answering to the supreme laws of the land for the rectitude of your intentions, in the name and by example of the good people of the country, should solemnly publish and declare that the United States of America has, and of right ought to be, a free and independent union of states, that they are absolved of all allegiance to the constant growth of the state, and that all political connection between the local and federal power of the state is and ought to be totally deregulated, and that as free and independent states, they have the full power to legislate laws, conclude pacts, contract acquisitions, encourage commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do, and oppose any declarations of dependence, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, and mutually pledge each other your minds, your fortunes, and your sacred honor.